I don't even know if I remember how to do this, fellas. But we are back as Ryan pulls gum out of his mouth right when we start recording.
You don't want me chewing. Hold on.
Well, might be better than some of the things you say. So
very true.
Rude.
Very true.
But, man, I'm so happy to be here.
Fresh paint.
Yeah, fresh paint. I'm so happy to be back. These guys have been bugging me for 6 weeks. When are we going to record again? When are we going to record again?
True that.
And it's happening right here. So we hope you guys are happy as we are to be back. And really, I was waiting for a special guest.
Got one.
Big bang.
We always say every time we bring a guest in, this is bigger than the guest before. I don't know if that hurts people's feelings, but
it's true.
If you were the very first guest, it does.
It probably does.
Sorry, Rico.
Yeah, sorry. So we'll tell a story about that in a second. But Emmy Award, go ahead and put it on the table for us. Put it up there.
Throw it out there.
Did you mention Emmy? Oh, okay.
Look what we found.
They don't even know me yet. I'm already pulling out an Emmy.
That's right. We have an Emmy Award winner
Big time.
with us, and we sat him next to Ryan.
Yep.
So you'll have to forgive us for that. But
No cooties, I promise.
comedian, we are going to get into all things comedy. What's the right word for his podcast? A huge podcast, worldwide, huge numbers podcast. Mr. Brian Bates, you're just a man of many talents. So,
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. We're honored. Thank you for doing this. We'll I don't know. I think the first thing we need to touch on is Brian just did a show for us here, about 150, maybe a little more people. Great. Really? He killed it.
Oh, yeah.
But it was the debut.
I was about to say, yeah.
The debut of my comic career. My first time ever doing stand-up, if you can really call it that.
That was your first time?
I'm making it sound way better than what it was. But,
Everybody has to start somewhere.
But
I would have never realized that.
We're going to get a raw critique here. No, don't hold back, Brian. We want you to be honest. Oh, that didn't sound good.
That did not. That's not the sound you want.
But so Brian and I were talking about how I was going to introduce him, all this kind of stuff, and I said, "Hey, man, I can throw a couple dad jokes in there or something if you want." I thought he would just laugh it off. That's a horrible idea. Thanks. You let the professionals handle it. And he's like, "Oh no, that'll be good." He said, "You bring them down, I'll bring them back up." It's like,
I like to set the standards.
There you go.
I knew I was going to be fine when they were laughing at a couple of your jokes. I was like, if they're laughing at that, I'm good.
So y'all heard that, right? I got laughs. He's saying
You did.
Yeah,
I heard them. You did.
So I was
You
totally
going to throw some jokes in on Sunday mornings now?
no.
Were you nervous?
Oh yeah. I was super nervous. Like, of course, I've never done anything like that. And people say, we're going to touch on this. Oh, I could do that. Like, everybody thinks that I can get on stage and tell some jokes. Everybody thinks they're funnier than they are. Right? And it was not easy for me.
I think the reason, you're absolutely right. I think the reason is if you play an instrument, people either know I can either do that or I can't. Most people can't. Or if you do magic, most people don't even know how it works or whatever.
Right.
But we've all made our friends laugh. So we all in the back of our mind kind of think, oh, I bet I could do that. I bet I could be funnier than that guy.
Right.
So that's why everyone thinks they're a comedian and tries it.
Well,
I know my place.
I will never try
That's
to
not
do
there.
No.
but I mean, it's really one. I mean, to tell it, you can't get up there and tell a knock joke, right? You know what I mean? Like, not on its own. I mean, maybe if it was not a knock joke, but a small one hitter as part of a longer set. But
one thing that I noticed is you showed confidence when you were up there. You showed
I
confidence.
can fake it with the best of them. Like,
Are you-
even if I'm horrible, like, I'm going to tell you I'm the best.
Are
You got to prove me wrong.
Do you preach here?
No. So I think I preached here
You've done
once.
once. Yeah, did once.
Once, at least once.
Yeah.
But
You're on staff, but you don't
Right.
get out in front of the audience.
just to do announcements or
Yeah.
something like that, a prayer, or but
That's a big part of it is overcoming the stage fright.
yeah. And I mean, I have spoken in front of people before I worked here and all that kind of stuff. That part wasn't. I'll get up there. I mean, if anytime you're in front of people for multiple times, I mean, you're going to make a mistake. You're going to say something wrong or whatever, cough, sneeze. everybody does that. Like, I don't,
Right.
that doesn't bother me, but
Yeah.
But let's hear it. We've kind of drug this out. Critique. What you got for my 3-minute comedy career?
It was better than I expected.
Well, I'll take it. That's a win. We can stop.
Yeah.
That's it.
Better
Done?
shut them all. Right? Yeah.
What did you have? 3 jokes?
Yeah, maybe.
So.
Yeah. So,
Let me see if I can remember them.
all right. Here we go.
There was one about the dishwasher.
Yes.
You did a callback at the end of the night. Didn't go over so well.
No. No. So yeah. So
We laughed. At
yeah.
my table,
I'll let you finish your critique, and then I'll defend myself.
Well, let me just, you did a joke about pushing the dishwasher button, and
Yeah.
then at the end of the night, you asked the ladies to wash the.
Oh yeah. No. That was yes.
And then you did a callback
Yes.
to your earlier joke about pushing the button.
They had forgotten me. You had done your set. They had forgotten everything I had said by that point.
And I've done that so many times. I've been emceeing at a comedy club, and I think I have a great set. Maybe I did, and then the comedian headliner will go up that they came to see, and then I'll get up at the end of the night and try to say something, and they're like, "Who are you again?"
Yeah. Well, so in that moment, I thought you were talking about something different. But in that moment, that was totally just off the top of my head. That was not so well. Didn't go so great.
You see, you had one about how you don't know how to fix anything or something like that, right?
Yeah, I was talking about my in-laws and how they are too good of people. You know, they're so good it makes me think something's wrong.
Yeah.
They're hiding something.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't remember the other one.
I had my kids in the car. The guy
Splash.
was
Oh, yes.
walking.
Oh,
down
yeah. That's probably your best one.
Yeah, and
The one he forgot.
That was the closer. Yeah, that was my closer. So I was like, hit them hard and walk off.
And get off
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah,
Drop them
Leave
off.
them wanting more.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, they want more. Let me put an Emmy winner in front of them now. So
But is stand-up something you've thought about doing?
no, this all well. I don't know. So we're going to get into the Brian Bates story here in a minute. It might be
I'm interviewing you somehow.
yeah. Well,
This is
Tell
awesome.
me about your childhood.
That's
This is
also-
awesome. This is great.
well,
This
that's
is great.
also because he has a podcast with 100 episodes and superstars on it. That he is one of the superstars, so he is much more comfortable than us.
Yes.
But what'd you say? Oh, stand up for me? No, I mean, not seriously. But it's just that I wanted to try it one time. Let me do it one time. I might bomb. I might not. But one time, all right, I did that. I can move on. But
So what is it? You got the bug now, or you want to keep going?
so because my boss may listen to this, I love this job. I have no plans of leaving ever. This place is great. We're doing a podcast with Brian Bates, an Emmy winner, and no. I'm not as a career. I don't think.
Never say never.
Yeah, well, I mean, never say never about anything, but would that propel me to do an open mic or something? I would have to really prepare. This I didn't. I put 10 minutes of prep, 15 minutes of prep time in. I would have to legit prepare. And even if I go up there and bomb, I would feel like I was prepared when I walked up there. Maybe I just wasn't funny. Blame it on the audience or bad audio, whatever. But I would have to really prepare to do something like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I had my day job for 8 years before I went full time into stand-up comedy, so
Yeah.
it's not like it just day one you quit and
Right.
give it
Right.
a shot.
So let's talk about that. Full-time comedian now. You do great things. Tour the country. You've been at the Ryman Auditorium, Grand Ole Opry, which are huge places here in Nashville, and they are broadcast throughout the country. The Grand Ole Opry is anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, you had a real job, quote unquote, a real job. Can you tell us your story?
No, I cannot.
All right. Well, next question.
And that'll be the end of this story. Thanks for listening.
We got more notes.
So can I ask how old you are?
I am 41.
Okay, so I was 35 when I took a stand-up comedy class for the first time. I worked in TV news here in Nashville, News Channel 5, Emmy winner here.
CBS affiliate.
Yeah, the CBS affiliate
CBS
here in Nashville, just local TV. Never was on the air, just behind the scenes, producer. I went to college here locally, Middle Tennessee State University, majored in broadcasting, worked at TV news, and then when I was 35, I took a stand-up comedy class just for fun. Didn't really have any plans. Never had met a stand-up comedian, so thought my image of stand-up comics were kind of guys you don't identify, unapproachable, kind of crazy, and there is a lot of that. Yeah. But I was blessed. I feel like God put this guy in my path with a guy who's a good Christian man who taught the class. And his name's Rick Roberts. He still teaches comedy classes here in Nashville. He's still a good friend of mine.
Write that down for me, Ryan.
And I really, really enjoyed the class. Still didn't think I was going to pursue a career, just something fun, but I really enjoyed the people in the class. And so I took that first beginner's level class. Then I took the next one, then the next one. Then I started going to open mics while working at the TV station. And it just kept snowballing and more. And then I started getting some paid work here and there. And then finally, at age 43, I quit my day job. Now, I was still single at the time, so I thought, you know what? If I go hungry, I'll only be hurting myself.
Yeah, it's just me. Nobody else is dependent on me.
It's just me.
Right. Ramen noodles, here I come.
Right. Yeah, so I'm like, I'm going to give it a shot. So I quit my job. I'd been there almost 20 years.
Wow.
Working there. I started right out of college and went full-time in stand-up comedy. And, I mean, the first few years were lean, I guess. But I'd saved up a lot of money. Again, being single, I had very low cost of living. I'd saved up for 8 years. And
now, before you made the switch, you were kind of pulling double duty, still working full-time for Channel 5 and working hard at night doing shows. And you lived off your comedy money only for a while to see if you could really make it, right?
Yeah. When I decided I was going to make this transition, I thought, let me see if I can just live off what I make in comedy. So for like the last, I think, 6 months of my day job, I lived just off what I was making stand-up comedy. And I was making it. So I thought, I think I can do this. And now since then, I mean, I drove for Uber for a while, just a little bit on the side. Who knows? I may have to go back to doing that. But
you have a joke about that, right?
I do. Yeah. I used to drive for Uber, and my biggest fear is I would drive before shows. My biggest fear is I'd pick up someone coming to my show, and we would just ride together to the show, and then we'd just both get out of the car and go in together.
That's your door over there, buddy. The talent entrance is this way.
But it just gradually built, and now I'm doing pretty well.
I'm intrigued by the minds of comedians because I don't want to say you think different. I mean, we're all people, but you're not afraid to say the things that you're thinking a lot of times. Comedians in general. Right. Your Nateland Podcast. So Brian is part of a crew of Nateland Podcast. Check it out. It's great. Tons of episodes, tons of guests, tons of people you have heard of, more than likely. But on that podcast, it's you and two other hosts. Yeah. It's kind of like middle school or high school. Like you guys just sit and, you're cutting each other down and do, but it's like brothers, it's like, Ryan and Fano and I, we're talking bad to each other, but it's like, but that's kind of the mind of a comedian of you're pointing out the obvious, in someone that most people aren't going to say. They're not going to be brave enough to say, or it's impolite. But that's also where your observations come from for your comedy, correct?
Yeah, and we have a topic on the podcast each week, but it always strays off, just like a real conversation. Right. And you're like, how did we even get to this? What were we even talking about? Yeah. Right. So we just let that happen. We just let it go. But yeah, stand-up comics, I was smart enough from the beginning, and I still do a lot of, you guys just heard my set, a lot of self-deprecating humor. Because I feel like that's the safest way to not offend someone. Right. Especially when you're starting out and you're not that funny.
Why do you look at me extra hard? Extra. Notice I did not talk about my wife. I did not tell any jokes about my wife who was in the room tonight.
I have a question, but I'll let you I have a question about that.
All right.
But I have to go home with her tonight, and I was trying to be smart. Her parents were not in the room, and I did talk about them, but it was like I didn't tell any like legit stories, right? It was based in truth. My in-laws are super great people who are always helping everyone, and I kind of based tonight off of that and told a couple of jokes off of that. But comedy for you, or for just in general, but I mean, it's about you. We want to talk about you. But in the mind of a comic, is the best comedy based in truth, or is it just made up?
No, absolutely. Unless you're one of these comedians who's like an absurdist, like that no one's going to think, like, I was trying to think of an example, but someone that just, well, like Carrot Topper. I don't know. Somebody like that's just like, well, that's obviously not real. You're not even trying to make us think it's real. But generally, yes. And I think that's the biggest difference between newer comics and more seasoned as you go. When I first started telling jokes and first started doing comedy, I would have jokes that maybe they were clever, maybe they weren't, and maybe people would laugh, but people probably didn't think, well, that really happened. Because I would usually embellish a lot, or maybe just outright make it up.
Right.
Now, I still embellish some, of course,
Yeah.
but it's mainly grounded in truth. And therefore, people, you kind of can tell when something's probably true or probably not.
Right.
And when I first started, I look back on some of my jokes. That might have been funny, but nobody's like, oh, that didn't happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you get better. I noticed because I am having a baby. I'm 50 years old. My wife's 45, and we're having a kid.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And when I tell that now on stage, I can tell sometimes, I can sense the crowd. They're not sure if I'm telling the truth. And they're kind of waiting to see, wait a second, is this a punchline? What's the punchline here?
Yeah.
And I sensed it tonight. Like, people are like, they applauded, good for you. But I could also sense some people are like, okay, what's the punchline? Surely this guy's not really having a kid.
Right. You guys feel free to chime in, but Brian and I are going to have a conversation. 'cause-
Hey, I'm
I
just
here.
listening.
Yeah.
This is great.
Well,
I'm loving it.
So tonight was a huge age range in the audience. So
right.
150 people or a little more, and the age was
150 or a little more.
yeah.
I'm joking.
So about early to
Good
mid
estimate.
early to mid 20s.
When I got here, it was.
Yeah.
to about 150. I mean, huge age range. Like
Right. Yeah.
80s. I mean, legitimate upper 80s, mid to upper
Yeah.
80s, down to 20. Right? Mm-hmm. Does that make it harder, or if the audience is that diverse?
Yeah, it can. I mean, I find church shows are some of the hardest shows to do because the setup's often wrong. You guys had the setup perfect tonight. I'm not just saying that. I mean,
You
it
would
was
say that regardless.
so many.
Why didn't you say that before we started recording?
So many churches or corporate events I do, the room setup's all wrong. People are spread out. And then at church, yeah, you got kids running around. There weren't really any kids there tonight.
No, they were on the other. So we provided childcare. They were
We
on
had
the
them
other
cleaning
side.
dishes. So
But so me not know, like I told you that Brian and I have been friends for like a solid 3 hours, but we've been pen pals for a couple weeks before this. But I was asking you questions about this setup and what here's kind of what we can do. Here's some options. What do you want? Because I wanted you to do great. Obviously, you might come back one day, but I wanted the event to go great as well. So it's like, what makes you comfortable? Because if you're comfortable, you'll pull the audience into you.
Yeah, and you did it. I mean, to answer your question, a lot of events, there'll be kids running around everywhere. And then, I mean, in a church setting, you got to be really careful what you say anyway. And then with kids, even more so. Like tonight, I said things like dumb and he's an idiot. And I know some parents don't want their kids hearing that.
right.
Yeah.
So it's tough. And then you have older people that either from a different generation don't get certain things. If you're talking about social media or whatever, there were jokes tonight I could sense one side of the room was getting a little bit more than the other, and or appreciating the list at least.
So I was walking around taking some pictures when you were talking about computer passwords, and I was thinking, is he going to lose part of the audience on this because of their age?
Yeah.
But where I happened to be, there was a table full of senior adults, and they were all belly laughing when he was talking about, and I was like, it might make more sense to these people because everything about a computer is foreign, and they'll try to do, but they know they've gotten the message that he just talked about. Like that has popped in front of their face before.
I find in church settings, one of the biggest things that people tense up about is race. People don't want to, and I have a joke about my mom, who lives in 100% true, lives in a little bitty town, 99.9% white. So whenever she meets a non-white person, she has to tell me about it. There's no reason for her to have to tell me. It has nothing to do with the story. But she mentions, whatever race they are. And I just did a church show over Christmas, did 2 shows, and the first one was an all-white audience. I told that joke. People really tensed up. And I find this anywhere. They tense up because we shouldn't be talking about this.
Yeah.
The next show, black family sitting right up front. I could the pastor's wife even told me, you probably don't know. I told the same joke. They loved it. The whole audience loosens up. It's totally different. People just get so tense in church settings about certain things.
Right.
Everyone has their own line that they have to draw. I know that. Yeah. But people are just so tense about certain subjects. I don't even know how I got off on that. But
yeah, well, that brings up another question. For a white comedian, is it harder to tell race jokes than a comedian of another race?
Well, of course, yeah, but unless I'm in front of an all-black audience. I have a video. I'm going to promote myself now.
Oh, we'll do that for you too at the end.
I have a video on YouTube that has 2.5 million views, and I posted it. So and it says, what did I title it? Black audience surprised when white boy takes the stage. And it's got 2.5 million views because I come out and I'm the only white guy on the show, and I kill. And I'm talking about race. I'm not hiding from it. And everyone appreciates that if you're just honest and tell about it. But if I told those same jokes in front of all white audience, they would tense up. You know what I mean?
Is it okay for me to laugh at this?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Who's looking at me laughing?
Yes. And that goes back to like the mind of a comedian, which is part of the part of your podcast that I enjoy. Of if something's funny, it's funny.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be mean. If Fano and I are telling jokes, if it's funny, we're going to laugh at it. That doesn't mean we are racist or against each other or anything like that. We're making an observation of some kind. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, I know you should not say some things to people. We all have a line. I'm not, but still, people get so tense about just the littlest things.
So you're recently married.
Yes.
And I know you tell a lot of like jokes about concerning your wife.
Yes.
So is there like a limit line or something that y'all have discussed prior to, or is it just like a free for all? Whatever.
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is the whole mustache bit that you did, and I was like,
yeah,
she heard this one before.
Yeah, that always gets groans when I tell it. But she's heard that joke a million times, and she approves. If you're listening, I'll talk about my wife's mustache.
And I think for the audience, it would be how long you've been married, too. Like someone that's been married a long time, a husband, he would laugh with his wife sitting next to him. But newlyweds, so you did not know this. You had 2 newlyweds right in front of you.
Yes.
They got married like 5-6 months ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
So some of the jokes that you were saying, I was looking right at them. But he may not laugh being a newlywed at that.
No, that ain't funny.
Yeah.
Well, and it goes back to my comment about race. I do jokes. I open for a comedian named Leanne Morgan, and it's the majority of our audience are women in their 50s and 60s. And when I talk about my wife's graying hair or her mustache, they love it. They go nuts over it because they, again, identify with it.
Yeah.
But there are audiences that sometimes they don't tense up, but they're kind of like, whoa, we shouldn't have said that. But she's never said no to a joke. There is some new jokes I have. There was one just recently where I didn't tell it tonight because it's a little it's a little more risque for my for a church setting. Yeah. And the punchline was, I don't know how to say it without telling the joke. But anyway, she said, I don't know if I would say that because that's kind of not your brand. And I agreed with her. So I kind of tweaked the joke a little bit to make it a little bit more friendly, I guess.
Yeah.
Because she obviously knows that obviously you're a comedian and stuff. So
yeah.
I just wondered if.
Yeah, she's seen all my jokes, and she's a great sport about it, and so far, and and she can give it right back to me.
That's what you want too. Like, you don't want it to be one-sided where she would get offended and maybe not say something about it.
Yeah. Like the joke I told on the Grand Ole Opry a joke about her and her gray hair or whatever, and I posted that clip on social media, and she replied, "Well, at least I have hair," which it's a good comeback.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I was single, most of my comedy career I've been single, so all my jokes starting out were just about being single in my 40s and things like that.
Right.
And then when I got married, everyone was like, "You're going to lose your entire act because you got to get rid of all those single jokes." But now I have so many jokes about my wife that it switched, and I still tell some of those single jokes. I told some tonight, just back when I was single.
Right.
It's not like you have to just get rid of them.
All right.
So when you're working on new material, how much are you looking for the audience response for you to go tweak that? Does that make sense? Did I word that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I go try them out at open mic sometimes, and then I often record my set so I can go back and watch it and see what they laughed at and what they didn't. And then, I'll tweak, or sometimes I just get rid of it. I'm like, that's not going to work. You guys, so obviously I just announced just recently that I'm having a baby. Mm-hmm. And you could probably tell tonight that my newer material was about my baby, having a baby. Was it some of the biggest laughs because it's newer material? And I'm still kind of working that out.
Right.
So if you notice like a little dip in the laughter, it was probably there because that's new stuff that I'm trying to figure out.
I mean, just one or two word, like changing a word or
even how he said it, not changing words, just how the punchline comes out or whatever. Maybe.
True.
But that's part of your revision process, right? You might change a word, and now a dud is a stud of a joke, and just off a couple words being changed, or maybe changing an order of a sentence or two, right?
Yeah, usually editing down. That's the biggest thing. You got to whittle it down. People get too wordy starting out, and if I had one critique of your jokes tonight, there's a lot you could trim up there, and that's everybody.
Right.
You start, and then you work your way down to see what's funny.
Yeah. Should have recorded myself tonight, fellas. That would have been great.
Left all the cameras
I'm back at the beginning.
Means you got to do it again.
Yeah, I don't.
Is there anybody still here? We can go back down.
I don't remember.
Well, just tell them for us now. And,
yeah.
And
well, all right. I'm glad you guys are here. That would be maybe the worst way to bomb is to put that out on a podcast and that's not funny. Not funny at all. I'd never go see this guy.
Yeah.
But so Fano has a list of questions that people gave him.
I do.
From downstairs.
One was your daughter,
Seriously?
Your daughter's name.
Yeah. My daughter's name?
Yeah.
7.
What would the name be?
Seinfeld. My wife.
It's okay if you don't, but that was just
my wife and I actually last night kind of whittled it down to our top 2.
Okay.
And for the first time, I'm announcing it. No, I'm not going to say. We're going to keep it to ourselves, at least for now. But we're down to a couple.
7 and soda? Is that the 2? Is that do you know what that's from?
Isn't that from Seinfeld?
He already told you the answer. If you would have said,
come on now.
Oh, I've watched a lot of stuff. It doesn't mean I'm a fan of that stuff.
I am a fan.
So Jerry Seinfeld, huge comedian, one of the best in the business, says the same thing. Like he had a bit on, I don't know, one of his, I think it's an older show, but maybe after the TV show quit and he was making a comeback, was on stage and said, everybody here thinks they can do what I do. Like, you think you can come up here and give a comedy set, but you can't. And it just gets back to that mindset of a comedian and, making observations that are funny to everyone in a room or most everyone in a room. And That's why I am intrigued by comedians and just being able to do that, because it's a job that's different from every other job in the world.
Yeah, there's a documentary called Comedian, and it's Jerry Seinfeld and a then young up-and-coming comedian named Orny Adams. And it's very good, even if I think you would enjoy it even if you're not a stand-up comedy fan. Well, it's 20 years old now, but it was right after Seinfeld, the show had ended, and Jerry was going back out and trying out all new material. Have you seen this?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And it's really interesting because even someone as big as him was bombing because they're trying out all new material and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And kind of chronicles him and this young comedian both trying to make it. And I think it's great, and I recommend anybody to see it.
Yeah, and I think the one thing in that show is he had some leeway because he was well known. He had done stand-up for a long time, Tonight Show, and obviously his TV show. So when he would go to these comedy clubs, he had some leeway. If he had notes and he was kind of working through his notes, or let me see what, there'd be a pause, and then he'd tell a joke. Well, he was trying to get it right and get a set going again.
But he points out in that, comedy is the one thing that you don't have much leeway in, because we can fake, like when I go watch my friends play guitar, and there's a bunch here in Nashville, you can listen politely and then clap, even if they're terrible, and you'll never know the difference. Yeah. But comedy is something you can't, laughter is something you can't fake.
Right.
Maybe a short time, but not for long.
Right.
People are you can't do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think he said, they'll give me a couple minutes because of my name.
Like, yeah.
But then it's like, you need to make me laugh.
So like when you go out on tour or whatever, obviously you have a list of jokes that you're going to do, but like depending on where you are, do you completely change that order completely, or is it just tweaking jokes and that's it?
It's just tweaking jokes.
Gotcha.
I'm clean no matter where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I don't have to change it a ton,
Right.
but I have finally gotten to the point in my career now where I have enough jokes that I can take some out, put some in based on the audience and how I think they're. I told a lot of church jokes tonight. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do that necessarily at a comedy club. I might still tell a few.
Yeah.
But especially if I'm in the South, because they get it more.
But they'll have to be more broad hitting, not as specific.
Yes.
Yeah.
About Jesus' birthday or something like that. Yeah. They got to be more broad. And when I'm up north, it's really, they just don't go to church as much up there,
Right.
I just did a show in New York. Where was I? Not Long Island, but Albany, New York. And I did that Chick-Fil-A joke. Yeah. And I think I said it tonight. You guys like Chick-fil-A? It's usually a given that people like Chick-fil-A, right. But not everyone likes Chick-fil-A. And some of their beliefs, some people don't like. And New York's very liberal. And I said, you guys like Chick-fil-A? Like, no. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm still going to tell this joke. And sometimes I go places that don't even have Chick-fil-A. I do really small towns, and they know what Chick-fil-A is, but they're not going to know that the drive-thru is what it is.
Yeah.
So they're not going to get it as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I change it up some.
Yeah.
We have a flashing light that turns off at 10 o'clock. We're not worried about Chick-fil-A drive-thru lines. So, travel, how many weeks a year do you travel on average, you think?
It's definitely increased more the last couple of years. I would say now probably more than I'm not. I've gone more weeks than I'm not on the weekends. So probably I would say 30 to 35 weeks of the year.
Out of 52. Okay, you say nice.
I don't know.
But that can get old, right? Like
it can, but it is nice.
But you enjoy. That's what you enjoy.
Yeah,
and maybe in the beginning it's nice because you're seeing new places and all that kind of stuff. But then after a while, it's just a routine.
Mm-hmm. So. But it's. I had back-to-back weekends just recently where weather was terrible. One, getting out of Nashville Airport when the snow came through last month or whatever, and I was stuck there all day just getting out of town. And then the next weekend, getting home when snow was coming through, and they shut down all the flights. I was in Roanoke, Virginia, and everything was shut down, and I had to rent a car and drive home in the middle of the night. Wow. So that wasn't fun.
No.
But generally it's fun.
I don't want to be rude or anything, but you're kind of like a mid-level comedian. I mean, as far as national.
It's the nicest thing I've ever heard.
You're not seeing that right there?
Well,
Did
what were you
you
saying?
flash
Did
that
you see
more?
this?
Does that look mid-level to you?
That does not look
Do
mid-level.
you need to polish
Okay.
it so you can read it better?
Yes.
We'll let you polish
World?
it. You wore the same shirt as someone else, and it was noticed.
That was not on purpose.
Yeah, but how tough is it, like coming up through the ranks? And like you said, very few people are going to be at a Seinfeld level or
Yeah.
Rodney Dangerfield or whatever a comic's name that someone would know. How
You know
tough
what?
is it coming up through those levels? And does your travel change? Does where you stay change? All that kind of stuff as you come up through and play different venues.
I started comedy when I was 35. Like I said, I took that stand-up comedy class. And for most of my career, I've been like, oh, man, if only I started like I should have, like in my early 20s, like most people did. Dave Chappelle was a teenager, I think. But most people start either the early 20s or right out of college, mid-20s, and I was 35. So I think, man, if only I'd done that. But now, the more I think about it, realistically, I don't know if I'd have been mature enough in my early 20s to do it because it's really, really hard.
Right.
You're living out of your car. You're making no money. You've got 6 roommates, you know. Yeah. It's a hard grind for a long time. I don't know if I would have had the wherewithal. Whereas the route I took was keeping my day job, making money, putting it away. And then when I quit my job, I didn't have to just go sleep in a van or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
I certainly wasn't making a ton of money, but I could.
He was being responsible.
I was being responsible. So in a way, this is probably the only route that would have worked for me.
Your podcast, Nateland, with Nate Bargatze, he's blowing up right now and getting Netflix specials and Tonight Show and all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
What makes him? This may be a dumb question, and if it is, we'll edit it out. But what's the special sauce for him to get it? Is it just one lucky break or a couple lucky breaks versus you or somebody else getting a Netflix special or Tonight Show? Or is it just getting in front of the right people at a gig?
I mean, that's some of it. Nate moved to New York, and that's where it really helps to make it. Less now, maybe, than then, because now the world's getting smaller, and you don't have to necessarily go to New York or LA for people to notice you, but it helps.
Yeah.
And he got on stage every night for years, multiple times a night, and he just really, really, really got good and really, really worked hard. And then he does have a unique voice. You got to stand out and be different than other people.
Yeah.
And there's a million comics out there, and we're all kind of saying the same thing. So you got to have a unique style.
Yeah. So I think maybe you guys talked about it on your podcast of joke stealing.
Yeah.
And comics make a big deal out of it. But I think you guys said, everybody has the same kind of joke. So that doesn't mean, if you tell a joke about Chick-fil-A and I tell a joke about Chick-fil-A, that doesn't mean we're stealing a joke from each other.
Yeah, I've got a new joke I tell now about pushing the button on the dishwasher and waiting for my wife to come in when I see it. And hey, if you have one like that too, that's a coincidence. It's not like I saw you.
Yeah,
Ron, it was a lot funnier when he said,
Right, I agree with you. I agree.
That stung a little bit. That stung. Yeah, but we'll talk about franchising fees and stuff after. We'll take that business off air.
But I mean, that is an example. You did it for the first time. I've been doing it for 15 years, and we both did have a joke about our wife and not knowing how to do things and dealing with her parents. So we did have similar, and that was your first time.
Yeah, and thankfully I did not steal any jokes knowingly. I don't know. I did a little bit of research, but not.
you did great.
I don't think I stole his act.
I couldn't. Those 3 minutes, I couldn't have.
Yeah.
No, seriously. I don't do well on stage like that.
Yeah. So,
Nateland.
Yeah.
What was that process of you coming together with Nate?
So how long have you known Nate?
Probably about 13 years, something like that. 13, 14 years.
How did y'all get together?
I never knew Nate when he was doing stand-up comedy in Nashville. He never really did stand-up comedy in Nashville. He moved to Chicago and started his career there. And then a couple of years after that, he moved to New York. And when I first met him, he was living in New York, but he would come home a lot for holidays, visit his family, things like that. We were both Vanderbilt fans. There's not many Vanderbilt fans in this town. We're about the only two, you know.
Well, they're quiet. There are a lot of fans, but they're quiet.
Yeah.
During most seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spring.
So we could have introduced you. We have a lady downstairs. She's been on our podcast before.
Mm-hmm.
She saved the Music City Bowl trophy when Vanderbilt won the trophy.
She saved it.
She saved it.
Oh, yeah.
So they were standing there after the game.
Yeah.
Team is walking out to get on the bus, and her husband were right next to the bus. And there was a curb, so you step down to the street. David Williams, the athletic director at the time, came and he tripped on that curb, and she caught him and caught he was carrying the trophy. She caught him, caught the trophy, saved it.
Wow.
Save the day.
Saved the day.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Outdoors.
But that's how we had that in common. And then we're both clean comedians, and there's very few clean comedians out there. So we just kind of hit it off and became friends. And then, I mean, for years, either I'd go up to New York and hang out with him, do shows up there, or, you know, just see him when he come home. And then he moved to L.A. for a while. And then almost the exact same week that I quit my job and went full-time stand-up comedy, he moved back to Nashville, just coincidentally, to raise his family here. And then I started going on the road with him and started opening for him. So for the last few years, I've been doing that. And then during the pandemic, when everything was shut down, he had already kind of talked about doing a podcast, but he's so busy, you know, just, you know, get around to it. But when everything shut down, he's like, well, now's the time to do it. So he started Nateland Podcast and asked me to come on board. And at first I was supposed to be just like a producer and the guy who occasionally chimes in, like on a sports talk, you know, or the guy in the back.
Yeah.
And then we were looking at other, another host with him, kind of like for him to play off of. And we batted around a few people. But then you mentioned our friend Aaron Weber, who's a very funny comedian here in Nashville. And so we asked him to come on board, and then the show started. And it turned out I talk as much as anybody. I mean, I guess Nate talks the most, but it's not like I'm occasionally chiming in.
Right.
It's pretty
So,
cool.
And just like any podcast, things evolve. I don't know if I'm talking about evolution on a church podcast, but things change, you know.
Edit.
Just like this podcast, it'll be different 6 months from now than it is now.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would hope.
We are. So
Yes.
we did not say at the beginning, I was so excited to get into a conversation with Brian. We have a new studio set up here.
Yep.
So we got rid of the black curtain. We used to have just a black curtain behind us with some wood accents. So we have some bookshelves now. They're pretty bare. So we will get some.
Got a bottle of water.
So there's a story behind that.
It's turned around backwards.
I mean, you know, maybe one day we'll have an Emmy.
We don't have a sponsor yet, so
Yeah. We're working on all that kind of stuff. But so we're going to bring in some memorabilia and put on the bookcases. But the bottle of water, Fano's wife hates it when we drink water on the podcast.
now we do it on purpose.
So we do it on purpose, and she says
Correct.
it just looks unprofessional or whatever her wording is.
Yes.
We're like, we get thirsty. We're talking.
We do.
I even
So
sometimes
now-
like to
Well,
that's on purpose.
That's just because you are unprofessional. But
Yeah, I don't get paid for this. Come on now.
it's a joke. I was like, if we don't have any decorations, we're going to have a bottle of water on the bookcase. But
That's great.
this is not the final version. We have more things we're going to do. Some more surprises for you guys that you don't even know about yet.
Hey.
Nice.
Now, what do you put on the bookshelf of a church Christian-based podcast?
So we will put
Great question.
Bibles and
maybe, I mean,
Quran?
not that, but you know, so we've had some athletes come on before that were college or pro athletes, so we'll get some stuff from them. A friend of ours, Zach, he's been on the podcast. He's a financial guy, has a lot of athletes. He manages financially. He's going to the NBA All-Star game next weekend.
Yeah.
I think it's next weekend. So this podcast will come out after the All-Star game. But he has promised to bring us something home from that we can display. We'll see if he follows through with that or not. But I have a bowling pin in my office.
Yeah.
there's no story behind it other than it came with the office. So we'll put the bowling pin up and
some LSU memorabilia.
Well, Ryan's an LSU.
I brought
fan.
it. Who knows if it gets voted on?
I mean,
there's no vote. Just claim a cubby.
Rent is pretty cheap at the moment.
If it's for me, it'll be up.
So we hope there'll be some Nateland swag or some Brian Bates swag or something that makes its way to a shelf.
I wish I'd have known it. I guess I just give you my Emmy.
Well, we're okay with that.
That just means he's got to come back. He's just got to come back. Speaking of Emmy, I did have some notes. You have a friend who was nominated for an Emmy. There were four nominations for this Emmy Award, and he was two of the four.
Yep.
Can you tell that story? I think it's hilarious.
So it's my buddy Ben. He works at News Channel 5, still does here in Nashville TV station. He's a reporter. There's a Mid-South Emmy Awards. That's what this is. I didn't win a Emmy that you see in L.A.
It's a real Emmy.
It's
a real Emmy.
Yes, it's a real Emmy to me.
It's the Mid-South Emmy Awards, which covers Tennessee, North Carolina, and Northern Alabama. And he had...
Huge area.
I can't remember what the category was. Maybe Best Investigative Reporting or something like that. He had two of the four nominations were a story that he did.
Okay.
So he's already got a 50-50 chance. They get ready to announce the winner. They say, we have a tie. Now he's like, oh my gosh, I've won two. Neither one of them was him.
That's great.
He had a 50-50 chance. They had a tie, and he lost both. So it's a good story. I've told that more than once in the podcast.
Yeah, that's funny. The another there's a let's talk about labels, right? Do comedians like labels by large? So clean comedian, Christian comedian, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does that limit?
Yeah, I mean, for generally speaking, I would just rather be labeled as a comedian.
Right.
We had Henry Cho on the podcast, and I've opened for Henry a lot, and I've heard him say numerous times he doesn't want to be labeled as a Christian comedian. He wants to be labeled as a comedian who's a Christian. Or I guess he doesn't want to be labeled at all, but that's how he identifies as. He doesn't think of himself as a Christian comedian. He thinks of himself as a comedian who's also a Christian.
Right.
And I feel the same way. I mean, the best compliment you can have is from an audience when they don't even don't even notice that you're clean until after the fact, till someone points it out. Because there's the label of clean comedian is cheesy, hokey, kind of not as funny.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, it's not good to be labeled.
So I know him as a Christian comedian. That may not be a good title, but Michael Jr. had told a joke of he was, at a show telling a joke, and someone said, well, "That's funny," and he's like, well, "You can't laugh. You just got to say that's funny. Like that's not even like that's almost insulting. I'd rather you just sit there." But that came to my mind a second ago when I said that's funny.
Michael Jr. is very funny.
Yeah,
I've opened for him before.
Yeah, well, hey, tell him there's a great podcast he could come be on.
Come this way.
And then after he does Nateland, send him over here. So, Grayson Garvin, we had him on. He was a former Vanderbilt baseball pitcher here. You have a baseball story as well.
Yeah.
I've
got more than one.
Well, the one I've heard of, you may be the only, this has got to be a small club, at any level, of a baseball player who has stolen first base.
Hey.
Well, you kind of just gave the punchline there, but...
Well, I didn't know how else to lead you into that story.
Good job.
When I played Little League Baseball, I was so unathletic, for one. I know that shocks you guys.
No.
Lack of confidence. I stole a base once, and I got down there so easily because,
So you were on first base and stole second, right?
Yeah, I was on first, stole second. In Little League, usually the catcher can't even get it down there. It's not that hard to steal second, but for me it kind of was. It was a 50-50 chance. There's always going to be a bang-bang play when I'm stealing second. This particular time, I get there so easily that somehow I got it in my head that the ball must have been fouled off. and therefore it's a dead play.
Yeah.
So I get to second. I turn around and start jogging back to first. About halfway down, people realize, like the catcher, the first baseman looks like he's coming back. So now I realize, like, oh crap, and I have to just hightail it to first base. I dive head first into first. There's a play. There's dust. I'm safe, but yeah. So I stole second, and then I went back and stole first. I stole 2 bases, I guess, on one play.
I hope you got credit
awesome.
for both of them.
I don't know. Is that the air? Or what's going on? Where's our earthquake?
Yeah, we might be in the earthquake. I think it's the cleaning crew moving the cart.
I heard it. I was like, "Don't make a face! Don't make a face!" I'm listening. I promise.
Is there a jet engine taking off?
Yeah.
No.
Or the building may be on fire.
I didn't know if it was in the headphones or if it was. So I was like,
I don't know if the audience can hear that or heard that, but yeah,
It's like a jet engine roaring.
it was a little scary here. Look, I was waiting to see who was going to be the first one to dive under the table.
I looked down.
Yeah.
So I was.
You can't see it, Brian, but this table is built in sections, so there's a lot of leg support.
yeah.
They have a ton of leg support, like
I got one right here.
like there's just
Straddling it.
Yep.
there's 2x4s all along there. They can't go anywhere.
Double
We're
right
safe.
here, so
You and I, no problem diving under
man,
this
I got the
table.
good spot.
Yeah.
Fall over and then get up.
Yeah.
I'll be out of the building before we get out of this chair.
We will call 911 for you
Thank you.
guys after we dig
Thank you
ourselves
so much.
out from the
You have to,
rubble.
like, push
Thank
the
you.
table up.
Nateland's huge podcast. I don't know how many tens of thousands of listeners you guys have but huge numbers every week. How has that grown? How many people are behind the scenes that we don't see?
There's usually 3 production people there, one running each camera, and then a third one doing audio and adjusting, stuff like that. And there's 4 cameras. And then Nate's wife is kind of like a producer on the show and kind of handles sponsors and ads and stuff like that.
You all don't edit, like you're just there to talk about the stuff, and the other people do all the editing and all that kind of stuff as well?
Now, we don't edit out anything. I know that.
Well, because it's live. Like you have people running it live as you're doing it, yeah.
Yes, and but they do go and, I mean, every camera is running. I don't know how you guys do it, but do you go edit later?
Oh, yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible.
Well, it's probably the same thing then. Every camera runs in full, and then they have a guy who goes back later and edits which camera shots to take.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, we
Things
do
like
that.
that.
I'm that guy.
Okay.
I'm that,
Yeah.
Well, it's the same then.
yeah.
Do you leave in the earthquakes, or do you take those out?
Oh, that's going to stay in. So I figured out what it is now. So down in that space that we had the show in tonight, they have portable walls that they can move, and
that
they
makes
divide
sense.
that into different rooms.
I
So
got you.
they're moving all those walls
I
now.
got you.
Yeah. So mystery solved, boys. You have sponsors. I mean, it's a huge podcast,
Yeah.
right? You have sponsors and stuff. This is nerd talk. No one else is going to care about this, but like the process of people. Do people approach you now? Are you that big, or are you? Hey, we like this product. We'd like you guys to come on if we can work something out.
We've definitely had people reach out to us, fans that want to sponsor it. But I don't know much about how podcast stuff works, but Nateland's done through a platform called All Things Comedy, and they have host a bunch of popular comedy podcasts on there, and then they have sponsors who are on a bunch of different comedy podcasts, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the sponsors we have are also on maybe 5 or 10 other comedy podcasts, all on the same platform.
Gotcha.
So we didn't go out and get any of those. They just kind of were there, provided. Now, it costs a ton of money to have your podcast on All Things Comedy, if that makes sense.
Right.
To be hosted on there.
Okay.
Something you said earlier, like
Yes.
jokes sticking with people and they're coming back to you, and
Yeah.
that's what you want. So a lady downstairs, or is actually a couple and their parents, but they're like, hey, when you were telling that joke about pushing the district, like, I saw all these guys looking, and like they were like, hey, that's me. And the guy was like, man, I've done that. Like I stood there and waited for her to see me push that button. But so that's what you're looking for as a comedian, like those things that stick, and you're like, oh yeah, that guy, I can relate.
Yeah,
Connection.
it's the whole, it's funny because it's true.
Right.
Which you've heard people say, and
Yeah.
that is so true. And to take it a step further, again, it goes back to kind of, it's got to be relatable, but also unique and have a unique voice, a different angle maybe than you hear from other people. And again, that's what Nate is so good at. And there's different type of comedians out there. There's what they call road comics. Those are guys who travel all over the country from city to city, and their comedy is more broad. So they may talk about traffic and I don't know. I'm drawing a blank now. But then there's guys who have a more specific about them kind of.
Right.
And, Nate would be one of those guys where it's very personal. And that can be tough when people don't know who you are. Nate's big enough now, people know what they're getting. But when I go on the road and sometimes I talk about my wife or something personal, and nobody knows who I am.
Right.
There's a lot of times I don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If your joke's good enough, they'll get on board, right?
But sometimes
is
they
that
don't
the
give me a chance.
mindset?
I did a company Christmas party a couple of months ago, and people could care less. They didn't want to be a comedian there. They were kind of forced. If we're going to get our bonus, we're going to sit through this comedian. The company thought it was a good idea, but they don't know me, and they think Ted in accounting's funnier than I am. Yeah. They'd rather just him get up and tell jokes.
Your Jelly of the Month Club is writing on you not moving for the next 30 minutes.
Yeah. So it's you start when you do comedy for a while, you can kind of start watching someone's act and kind of tell what kind of crowds they do, whether it's mostly churches or mostly corporates, because they're always a different feel. Road comics are a little bit more polished as far as they could go to any city, any place, and kind of fit in.
Like big name, pick a big name, Jeff Foxworthy or somebody like that lots of people have heard of. When those guys go on the road, like, do they still go on the road even when they get that big and famous? I know individuals would be different, but are they always pulled back to the state, like being on tour, on a stage?
Yeah. Like Jerry Seinfeld still does it. Jeff Foxworthy still does it. I mean, there's times where they've got a project, a show, or something else that maybe keeps them from it. But when they're not doing that, they still go do it. And Jeff Foxworthy's still out there doing it. Sometimes they take a long. Eddie Murphy's taken off 30 years, but he's talking about getting back out there doing it. Wow. Chris Rock still does it. They all love it. It's immediate gratification.
Right. Yeah. And that's the hook, right? That's the pull of that is your drug, is not that, but that's your addiction.
Yeah.
Is the laughter, right?
That's one of them, but that's for another episode. I'm joking.
Yeah. But all right. So last topic. The also hear a lot of comedians. Robin Williams is maybe an extreme example, but there, a lot of comedians say, I fight depression or I fight these kind of demons, and comedy is my outlet. Like that's my treatment. That's that's what makes me feel better. And whether I bomb or slay an audience, I feel good when I'm up there. And as soon as I get off, the demons come back. Mm-hmm. How widespread do you think that is?
It's pretty widespread. The percentage of comedians who have depression or sometimes emotional mental issues is definitely greater than the average population, and that's what draws them to comedy. And it is strange. It seems like it wouldn't work that way, that people who have often been maybe picked on in school or made fun of and have zero confidence go do the hardest thing there is to do, get up in front of a group of strangers. Yes. It doesn't make sense in a way.
Right.
But that's very often what ends up happening.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm thankful that myself or the people I'm closest to aren't like that, where as soon as they get off stage, they're just miserable.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we all kind of get that high from being up there and performing. That's for sure.
This is going to end the day right here. Well, besides the Bible verse.
I'm good.
Right.
Will you mention this night on the Nateland Podcast in any form or fashion. Like, even if it's making fun of y'all are not going to believe I did this show and this Yahoo like forced his way into an opening act gig.
It's a good question.
The answer is no.
I'm trying to think about it. Here's the thing. We don't have any. We've recorded some ahead of time, so we're not recording any new ones for the next few weeks.
Gotcha.
So by the time we get back together, probably not.
All right.
But you never know.
I'll email you in a couple weeks. Hey, thanks for coming. Appreciate that. And
Appreciate that wonderful night.
Yeah. And it was great.
Here, any kind of mention would be great.
But I'll mention you in social media. I'll mention
there we
you
go.
here.
We got a promise.
There we go.
So, no, thank you very much. We're
awesome.
And so happy to have you and answer some questions that I was curious about. You know,
Yeah, we appreciate
Maybe
it.
the only one that was curious.
I
but
may be, but that's all right because I educated myself.
Hey,
So
never say never.
That's right.
Yeah. You, want me to go ahead
You
and
got
go?
one? Let's hear it.
All right. So I'm in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. So what I take from that is whether you're a comedian or you work for hospitals or you're a teacher or you work here at church as a staff, no matter what you're doing, there's always someone watching you, and always do it in his version of how he would want us to do it. So because someone's always watching you. So it's not me, it's what he's doing through me.
Well, there you go. We are glad to be back. Make sure you like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Send us an email, podcast@parkwaybc.net. We'd be happy to hear what you want to hear about and answer any questions. Maybe you got another question. I'll send it to Brian and see what he says. Thank you again, Brian.
Yeah,
so
thanks
glad
for
to
having
meet
me.
you,
Appreciate
and
it so
come back
much.
anytime.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
guys. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to GPS to God. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe wherever you happen to listen or watch. And make sure you turn on the notifications so you know when new episodes air.